It was a late evening in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. The presidential palace, usually buzzing with movement, had grown quiet. The tall corridors echoed only with the soft steps of night guards patrolling the grounds. Inside, President Ibrahim Traoré sat in his private study, a lamp glowing warmly on his desk. Papers were stacked high, policy drafts, international letters, and security reports. His mind was full of decisions that carried the weight of millions of people. But tonight was not just about politics. A soft knock at the door broke his focus. The voice on the other side was gentle but firm. "Ibrahim, it's me." He immediately recognized it. His younger sister, Mariam. She had been waiting for days to speak with him, and now she had chosen the quiet of the evening to finally confront her brother. "Come in," Ibrahim said, putting aside his pen. Mariam entered, her face calm but her eyes heavy with concern. Unlike the grand halls of power, her presence brought warmth, a reminder of home, of family, of childhood days when they had nothing but each other. She sat down across from him and took a deep breath. "Brother, I've watched you these past months. You hardly sleep. You hardly smile. You've carried this nation on your shoulders, and I fear it is breaking you. Please, Ibrahim, quit politics. Step away before it consumes you completely." Her words hit him harder than any critic or opposition leader ever had. This wasn't a political rival talking. This was his sister, the person who once held his hand when he was a child, who shared meals with him when food was scarce, who prayed for him in silence when he first entered the army. Ibrahim leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on her. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he let the silence sit between them. He could hear the ticking of the clock, the faint rustle of leaves outside, and the unspoken fear in Mariam's eyes. "Mariam," he finally said, his voice steady but low. "Do you remember the nights we went to bed hungry? Do you remember the times we heard our mother whispering prayers because she didn't know how she would feed us tomorrow? Do you remember how people treated us, the poor family in the corner of the village? You know as well as I do what it means to suffer in silence." Mariam's eyes glistened. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember every single moment." "That," Ibrahim said firmly, "is why I cannot quit. Because every time I see a child on the street with no shoes, I see myself. Every time I see a mother begging for medicine for her child, I see our mother. And every time I see a young man with no hope, no future, I remember the boys we grew up with who never made it out of poverty. If I walk away now, I walk away from them." Mariam looked down, her fingers nervously twisting the scarf in her lap. She wanted to argue, to protect him, to free him from the endless burden he carried. But his words pierced her heart. "Ibrahim," she whispered, "but you're only one man. You cannot save everyone. And in trying, you may lose yourself." He smiled faintly, not with pride, but with the quiet strength of a man who had already accepted his path. "Maybe I cannot save everyone, Mariam, but if I can change even one child, tomorrow, if I can protect one family from despair, then my life is not wasted. You see, politics is not about power for me. It is about responsibility, a responsibility too heavy to ignore, even if it costs me my comfort, my rest, my life." His sister's eyes filled with tears. She had always admired her brother's determination, but hearing him bare his soul like this was different. This was not the soldier she once watched leave for training. This was not the president people debated about on the streets. This was simply Ibrahim, the boy who grew into a man with a heart too big to stop fighting for others. She leaned forward, her voice breaking. "But Ibrahim, what about us? What about family? You're still my brother. I don't want to lose you to politics." He reached across the table, taking her hand gently in his. "You'll never lose me, Mariam. You are my family, my anchor. The reason I keep going is because of what we endured together. I fight for this nation so that other families don't have to go through what we went through. My love for you doesn't compete with my duty, it strengthens it." Tears slipped down Mariam's cheeks. She tried to hold them back, but his words had melted the wall she had built inside her heart. She realized she wasn't just speaking to her brother, the president. She was speaking to the boy who once promised her, as children under a broken roof, that one day life would be better. And now he was keeping that promise, not just for her, but for millions. The room was silent again except for Miriam's soft sobs. Ibrahim stood and walked around the table, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "Miriam, you asked me to quit. But if I quit now, I will betray not just this nation but myself, and everything we dreamed of when we were young. I cannot do that. I will not do that." She looked up at him, her heart torn between fear and pride. "Then promise me one thing, Ibrahim," she said softly. "Promise me that you won't forget who you are, that no matter how heavy the crown feels, you will always remain my brother." His expression softened and a rare, warm smile appeared. "I promise, Miriam, I will always be your brother. Before I was a soldier, before I was a president, I was your brother, and nothing will ever change that." Miriam broke into a smile through her tears. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder, and for a moment the palace felt less like a fortress of power and more like home again. Outside, the city lights of Ouagadougou glimmered under the night sky, unaware of the quiet conversation unfolding inside the palace walls. A sister who feared losing her brother, and a president who refused to let go of his purpose. For Miriam, the worry still lingered, but her heart was at peace knowing one thing for certain: her brother was not driven by ambition, but by love, and that love was stronger than any fear. For Ibrahim, the night felt lighter. His sister's concern reminded him of what truly mattered: not the titles, not the power, but the people he loved and the people he served. And as he walked her out of the study, hands still holding hers, he whispered quietly, "Tomorrow may bring battles, but tonight I am just your brother." The following morning, Ibrahim Traoré awoke earlier than usual. The conversation with his sister Miriam still echoed in his mind. The palace was just beginning to stir, soldiers changing shifts at the gate, kitchen staff preparing breakfast, aides arriving with folders under their arms. But Ibrahim lingered for a while by the window of his room, watching the city of Ouagadougou awaken. The call to prayer drifted faintly from a nearby mosque. Smoke rose slowly from small cooking fires in the neighborhoods. Motorbikes zipped through the streets, carrying workers to their jobs. It was ordinary life, yet in every sound, in every movement, he saw the faces of the people for whom he had chosen this path. When he walked into the council chamber later that morning, his closest advisors noticed the difference. He looked calmer, his shoulders straighter, his eyes focused. Not that the pressures had lessened; if anything, the reports waiting on the table were heavier than ever. But his sister's words had given him something precious: clarity. The defense minister began the meeting. "Excellency, we have received troubling intelligence. Certain groups are attempting to destabilize the rural areas again. They want to create fear and weaken the trust people have in your leadership." Another advisor added, "And there is pressure from abroad as well. They do not understand your choices. They believe you are too stubborn, too young. Some even say you are risking everything." Ibrahim listened quietly. His hands rested on the table, his gaze steady. Then he spoke, and his words carried the same conviction he had shared with his sister the night before. "Do you know why they call me stubborn?" he asked softly. The room grew still. "Because I refuse to abandon the people who have no voice. If being stubborn means refusing to betray the poor, the hungry, the forgotten, then I accept it with pride." His ministers exchanged glances. Some smiled faintly, others nodded. They were used to his fire, but today it felt different. It felt deeply personal. After the meeting, Ibrahim excused himself and walked out into the courtyard of the palace. The sun was already high, casting sharp shadows across the stone. He paused to greet a group of soldiers standing guard. These men were not just protectors of the palace. They were sons of farmers, mechanics, and teachers, young men who had chosen to serve their country in uniform. He looked at them closely, remembering his own years as a soldier. He had once stood where they stood, uncertain of the future but full of determination to defend his homeland. One soldier, barely older than 20, shifted nervously under Ibrahim's gaze. "What is your name?" Ibrahim asked. The young man straightened. "Isa, sir." "Where is your family, Isa?" "In Bobo Dioulasso, sir. My mother is a market woman. My father passed away." Ibrahim nodded slowly. "Do you miss them?" Isa's eyes softened. "Every day, sir." For a moment, Ibrahim saw himself in the boy leaving home, leaving family, carrying not just a rifle but the hopes of those waiting back in the village. He placed a hand on Isa's shoulder. "Then fight with honor, Isa. Not for me, not for politics, but for your mother, for the people who believe in you." Isa's chest swelled with pride. "Yes, sir." As Ibrahim walked on, his heart was heavy but resolute. His sister had been right. Politics had consumed much of his life. But she had also reminded him of something he could never forget: family. And in a way, every soldier, every child in the street, every struggling parent was his family now. Later that afternoon, Ibrahim found Mariam in the palace gardens. She was sitting quietly on a bench, reading. The roses were in bloom, their scent drifting on the warm breeze. He approached her slowly, not as a president, but as a brother seeking her presence. "You look thoughtful," she said, closing her book as he sat beside her. "I am," he admitted. "Your words last night stayed with me. They reminded me of why I must keep going." Mariam sighed. "I wasn't trying to stop you from caring for the people. I only wanted to protect you. Sometimes I wonder if you carry too much on your own shoulders." He turned toward her. "Do you know why I carry it, Mariam? Because I remember when we had no one to carry our burdens for us. I carry it because I want no child to cry the way we cried, no mother to pray the way ours prayed. If that means losing sleep, then so be it." Her eyes softened, though worry lingered. "But you're still human, Ibrahim. Even the strongest heart can break." He smiled faintly. "Yes, I'm human. That is why I feel this so deeply. But I also know that I am not alone. You are here. The people are here. Even when the world turns against me, I know why I fight, and that is enough." For the first time since she arrived, Mariam felt a sense of peace. Perhaps she would always worry about him, but she could also see that his heart was not chained by politics. It was guided by love. That evening, Ibrahim addressed the nation on television. The cameras were set up in the palace hall, the flag of Burkina Faso standing tall behind him. His words were firm but filled with emotion. "My brothers and sisters," he began, "I know the road is hard. I know many of you are tired, uncertain, afraid. But I want you to remember something. We are not defined by our struggles. We are defined by our courage to face them. I stand here not as a leader above you, but as one of you. I have known hunger, I have known loss, and I have known the pain of watching my people suffer. That is why I cannot and will not abandon this path. Not for power, not for wealth, but for you." Families across Burkina Faso listened in silence. Some wiped tears, others nodded with pride. His words carried weight not because of his title, but because they came from live truth. When the speech ended, Ibrahim returned to his study. Mariam was waiting by the door, her eyes shining with quiet admiration. "That was not the voice of a politician," she said softly. "That was the voice of a brother speaking to his family." Ibrahim paused, then smiled gently. "Because that is what they are, Mariam, my family, just as you are." She reached for his hand and squeezed it. In that simple gesture, both of them knew that despite the dangers, despite the heavy crown, Ibrahim's strength came not from ambition but from the bond of love. Love for his sister, love for his people, love for his homeland. And somewhere deep within her heart, Mariam realized that she could no longer ask him to quit. Because this was not just his journey, it was theirs, and the journey of every Burkinabe who still dared to hope. Days passed, and life in the palace resumed its rhythm, but something had shifted quietly between Ibrahim Traoré and his sister Mariam. Their late-night conversation had not only strengthened their bond, it had also changed the way Ibrahim carried himself. He seemed lighter, yet stronger, as though her challenge had purified his sense of purpose. One evening, after a long day of briefings and negotiations, Ibrahim decided to take a walk through the old part of Ouagadougou, far from the polished marble of the palace. He wore a simple shirt, without insignias of rank, and walked with only a discreet guard nearby. Mariam accompanied him, curious to see how the city received her brother when he was not cloaked in the aura of the presidency. The streets were alive with sound. Children playing soccer with a plastic ball, vendors selling roasted corn, women laughing together as they carried baskets on their heads. It was noisy, imperfect, and beautiful. As soon as people recognized him, whispers spread. "C'est le président." They moved closer, not with fear but with warmth. A woman in her 60s stepped forward, her hands rough from years of farm work. "My son," she said, her voice trembling, "you gave us hope when others abandoned us." She reached for his hand and pressed it to her forehead. Ibrahim bowed his head, humbled. Then a young boy, no older than 10, tugged on his sleeve. "President Traoré," he said shyly, "when I grow up, I want to be like you." Ibrahim crouched down so his eyes met the boy. "No, little one. When you grow up, be better than me. Be strong, be honest, be kind. That is how we will change our country." The crowd applauded softly, and Mariam watched in awe. She had known her brother all her life, but seeing him surrounded by his people, she realized fully why quitting had never been an option for him. Later that night, back at the palace, Mariam prepared to leave. Her visit had lasted longer than expected, but she knew her family needed her back home. Before departing, she found Ibrahim in his study, poring over reports by the faint glow of a desk lamp. "You never stop working," she teased gently. He smiled without looking up. "There's always one more problem, one more plan, one more life depending on what we decide here." She sat down across from him. "I came here thinking I could convince you to quit, to save yourself from this endless weight. But now I see that if you stopped, it would break you more than all of this pressure ever could. This is not just politics to you, it's your mission." Finally, he set down his pen and looked at her. His eyes, tired yet unwavering, held both gratitude and sadness. "Mariam, you gave me a gift. By asking me that question, you made me remember why I chose this path in the first place. It is not for power. It is not for recognition. It is for the farmers, the children, the mothers, the forgotten voices who depend on someone to speak for them. That is why I stay." She reached across the desk, took his hand, and squeezed it. "Then promise me one thing. Promise me you'll also live for yourself for us. Don't forget you're still my brother, not just their president." He chuckled softly. "I promise." When Mariam finally left the palace the next morning, she carried with her a newfound respect for her brother's burden. She still feared for him, still prayed for his safety, but she also felt pride that her brother had chosen to stand in the storm not for himself, but for everyone who could not. And as Ibrahim watched her car disappear beyond the gates, he whispered under his breath, "For you, for them, for all of us, I will not stop." That promise, born of a sister's love and a brother's determination, would echo in the hearts of millions who believed that leadership was not about ambition, but about sacrifice. And it was this promise that melted hearts across the nation when his story was told. The story of a president who was first and foremost a brother, a son, and a man who refused to abandon those he loved.